In July of 1983, an article published in the Indian newspaper Patriot made a bombshell accusation. The AIDS virus was deliberately created by the American military as a powerful biological weapon against their adversaries. This and subsequent reports created a worldwide media frenzy, with over 80 countries trying to understand the roots of the devastating epidemic. Little did they know that the institution behind the reporting was none other than the Soviet intelligence agency, the KGB, which created Operation Infektion to severely damage America's credibility. And it worked. The power of words. Disinformation has always been a powerful warfare tool. Unlike misinformation, which is often accidental, disinformation is constructed to be deliberately false and to plant the seed of discord in enemy ranks and entire countries' populations. For decades, the practice has been used in warfare by many nations, particularly as fake propaganda spread in Europe during World War II. However, its most notorious user over the years has indisputably been Russia. After the State Political Directorate recognized the enormous potential as early as the 1920s, Russia's former intelligence agency established a branch entirely dedicated to disinformation campaigns. The practice quickly became an integral part of the Russian intelligence system. And by the time the Soviet State Security Committee, or KGB, was established in 1954, disinformation distribution was an integral part of the country's political warfare. Throughout the Cold War, the Soviets mastered the art of creating tensions between longtime allies. Amongst the active measures executed by the KGB were media manipulation, document counterfeit, front organizations, and the occasional assassinations. The intelligence agency also excelled at using black propaganda, a form of publicity intended to create the impression that it was launched by the organization or person it was supposed to discredit. These attempts proved to be nebulous and prolonged. One of the first instances in which the Soviets used black propaganda was in Operation Neptune, an attempt to use falsified documents to imply that several Western politicians and public figures supported the Nazis. And although the West quickly exposed the operation, other Russian ruses proved more successful and even lethal. A new plan. By the mid-1980s, the human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV, had spread to 5 continents, officially converting it into an epidemic. All around the globe, but particularly in the United States, men and women were losing their lives to AIDS, or acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. This life-threatening condition was caused by untreated HIV. Back then, knowledge about the virus was scarce and inconclusive, and panic was quickly spreading worldwide. As the world looked for someone to blame, the KGB saw an opportunity to blame America, as AIDS-related cases were first reported in California and New York in 1981. By September of 1985, the Soviets informed Warsaw Pact intelligence agencies that they were about to launch a new major disinformation campaign, codenamed Operation Infektion. According to a now-recovered memorandum obtained from the former Bulgarian State Security Archive, KGB officials explained that they were, quote, carrying out a complex of active measures in connection with the appearance in recent years of a new dangerous disease in the USA known as AIDS. The report further explained that the campaign's goal was to create a favorable perception of Russia by pushing the lie that this devastating disease was the result of confidential experiments carried out by the United States Secret Services and the Pentagon, and blaming them for using new types of biological weapons that spun out of the laboratory's control. The campaign also intended to spark domestic political kerfuffles in the U.S. Although the KGB had most likely been pondering the campaign for a few years, this 1985 document is the earliest evidence available, as most of the Soviet intelligence's records were destroyed after the nation's collapse. Amongst the communist European intelligence agencies that participated in the Soviet effort was the East German Ministry for State Security, or Stasi, whose offices referred to the project as Operation Denver. Groundwork. In 1983, Project Infektion began when Patriot, an Indian pro-Soviet newspaper, published an anonymous letter from a well-known American scientist who claimed that HIV was developed in a secret biological weapons lab in Maryland. A month later, a Soviet newspaper that was well known as an outlet for KGB disinformation published an article written by Valentin Sepevalov, a Soviet press correspondent in West Germany. In it, Sepevalov detailed the alleged development of the virus. The author claimed that CDC employees traveled with Pentagon representatives to Nigeria and remote parts of Latin America to collect samples of the most dangerous viruses not found in Europe or Asia. These samples were then combined to develop HIV. Sepevalov insisted that the Pentagon carried out isolated experiments with the pathogen in Haiti and with marginalized groups in America: addicts, homosexuals, and the homeless. 2 years later, in 1985, retired biophysicist Dr. Jacob Segal wrote the Segal Report, claiming that the virus was synthesized by combining 2 other dangerous retroviruses. Despite being from East Germany, Segal was presented as part French to hide any possible communist affiliation. According to the document, the American military created the virus in 1977 at a top-secret laboratory, and less than 4 years later, the first AIDS-related cases started to publicly surface. Dissemination. The AIDS disinformation story quickly exploded around the world, appearing in over 80 countries. The disinformation followed the classic Soviet pattern. The story would appear in a publication foreign to the USSR, and it would then show up in Soviet media as the investigative journalism work of others. This propagation technique added credibility to the fake allegations, especially in impoverished countries where access to Western information was too expensive. To further push the campaigns in these countries, the Soviet-made propaganda was free of charge, and many of the features came with cash benefits. In order to refute the outrageous claims, American embassy officials wrote letters to their respective countries' journalists. Many of these rebuttals and press conferences resulted in newspapers printing retractions. Even Congress and the State Department publicly announced that it was impossible to create a virus as complex as HIV, as medical research at the time had only gotten so far as to clone simpler viruses. However, the damage was already done, and Operation Infektion was a success, at least initially. Not only had the disinformation created a public outcry against the United States, but it also shifted attention away from Russian chemical and biological weapon development. Russia's problem. Unlike Operation Infektion's data, the virus was very real, and Russia was not immune to it. In the mid-1980s, the disease struck the Soviet Union, prompting Russian scientists to seek American assistance. Unsurprisingly, the request was denied, as the Americans stipulated that no help would come from them until the disinformation campaign ceased. And although Mikhail Gorbachev's administration tried to derail American attempts to expose the fake campaign, it eventually grasped the epidemic scope, and Operation Infektion was officially shut down in 1987. Consequences. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia finally admitted that the KGB was behind the false claims, but the myths surrounding the virus were challenging to eradicate. In 1992, 15% of American citizens believed that the AIDS virus might have been created in a secret Pentagon laboratory. However, Operation Infektion didn't only affect American credibility. In the late 1990s, elected South African President Thabo Mbeki and his health minister fell victim to the fake stories, particularly the Maryland laboratory thesis. They then rejected professional advice when the disease hit South Africa and opted for other unproven alternative therapies. This delay is estimated to have cost up to 300,000 additional lives. Although the fake news industry might seem like a new concept to many, mass disinformation has existed for almost a century. Thank you for watching our Dark Files channel. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and hit the bell icon to be the first to know about our newest content.